Alright, so first thing I do is File, New. I like to work at 1920 by 1080, but you can work however big or small you like. Click OK. And for this tutorial, I think it's probably best if I just go ahead and animate a little thing, a little walk, very quick. So with this method, you're dealing with all of your animation frames in the Layers panel. So create my first keyframe. I'm just gonna create a new layer, and I like to color code them. I like to have my keyframes color coded yellow, and it's a little bit faster instead of typing it all out, but you can do whatever you like. Alright, first keyframe. Whoa. That was like a glitch. And when you want to onion skin, you just select your layers and change the opacity. Second keyframe, another yellow one. Okay, I got my two keyframes. Now time for the in-betweens. I like to make them red. Let's make that first keyframe a little lighter. And for this specific walk cycle, I am sort of going to mess with the timing of the frames a little bit, so I'm keeping all my in-betweens pretty close to the second keyframe. And another in-between after second keyframe. Okay, so that all looks pretty good. So I select all, make them all 100%, and only make first keyframe visible. And next you want to preview your little animation that you just made, so you go to Window, click on Animation, and if it's your first time doing this, it'll probably show up with the animation timeline. Caleb's going to show you how to use that, so I will not get into it. And to get to frame view, you go down to the little right hand corner here and click on this little button. Okay, so down here we have where it says once. We don't want to watch it once, we want to watch it forever. And above that you see 10 seconds. That's how long it'll hold on each frame. 10 seconds is a long time. We don't want that. All these are kind of very slow, so go to Other, and we're going to do this at 12 frames per second, or 24 frames per second, so that comes out to 0.04 about 1 divided by 24, and 12 frames per second, 0.08. Click OK. So for this animation, I'm going to have the first keyframe just sort of sit for 3 frames. So I just hit new frame, new frame. So we got our 3 hold frames. Then you hit new frame again, and then just go down the line, making previous frame invisible, next frame visible, until you are done. Okay, now when you're ready to watch it, you just hit play. I like to close it because it runs a little bit smoother because my computer's not that fast. And I'll also make it smaller, like around 33 to 25%. It'll usually give you a pretty accurate reading of what it's going to be. Alright, so I like that. That looks good. Stop. If you just want to make a GIF, just go to File. Make sure you have it all figured out here in your Animation Frames timeline. Then you just go to File, Save for Web and Devices, and you can export your GIF with however many, whatever settings you like. But we're not doing that, so cancel. For this export, we don't need this anymore, so I just get rid of all that, deleting the last one, first frame last, just leaving it there really. Okay, so if you remember, I had the first frame holding there for 3 frames, but I only have 1 in the layers menu, so I will duplicate it. Okay, looks good. Highlight, make sure they're all visible, everything you want exported in your sequence, all at 100%. Turn that off, the background. You don't want the background, or it'll export it as its own frame, which would look weird if it was just going from this to that. So turn that off, everything else on. Caleb will show you how to export from File, Export, Render Video. I don't like to do that because with this method I've found every once in a while a frame will get dropped and I don't like losing frames. So I go to Scripts, Export Layers to Files, browse wherever you want to put them. Hit OK. Make sure you check Visible Layers Only. And I don't know what these 2 buttons do, but I always have them checked anyway. And then hit Run. And this will take a lot longer than rendering video. I don't know why. It just does. Has to go through it all and... Alright, it's done. So next we go to After Effects. Go to File, Import, File, click on the first one, yes, okay, that wouldn't delete, so I had to leave that there. Yeah, click on the first file and hit Photoshop Sequence down here, but then also hit Force Alphabetical Order. If you don't, you'll get a weird looking thing. For some reason, whenever you export through the scripts method, you just kind of have to do that. Okay, then hit Open. Okay, then click on that, go to Interpret Footage, Main, and here you can control the frame rate and how many times it loops. Since we're just dragging it into a comp, it'll loop automatically, so 24 frames per second. Okay, drag it down in here and hit Preview, and there you go, there's the walk. Alright, that's it. That's all I have to say.
And I'm going to show you how to do some animation using video layers and the timeline. So go to File, New, and then for presets, I go to Film and Video, HDTV 1080p, put the resolution to 100, and we got our file. You're going to need your animation window open. For newer versions of Photoshop. I think it's called Timeline in general, but I'm using CS5, so it's right up here, animation. And then there's two settings for this. There's frames, which I think Charles is going to go over, and timeline, which I'm going over. So click right here in the top right corner of that window, go to document settings. This is where you can set your frame rate and the length of your timeline. So I'm going to do 12 frames per second. I'm just going to have this be a 1 second project. Then you're going to have to go to Layer, Video Layers, New Blank Video Layer. And now this video layer has just adopted the settings of your timeline. You can change it. If you go to Interpret Footage, you right click on it, Interpret Footage, this pops up, lets you change the frame rate, some other things. I'm going to keep it the same. Then there's a couple more things. There's frame forward, frame backwards over here. Spacebar is to play. And I have some hotkeys set up for that frame forward and frame backwards, so I can kind of toggle through and draw with my other hand at the same time. Onion skin is right here. So let's see. Turn that on. You're able to see the previous frame and the frame after. And you can change the settings of the onion skin right here. This you control how many frames you want to see, the opacity of it, and the blending mode. And that's pretty much the basics. There are a couple more things you can do, like insert frames and delete frames. So let's say I didn't want that frame right there. I right click on layer, or just go to layer, video layers, and then you can delete frame, insert frame, duplicate frame. Say you want to hold that frame for another. These are where you do it. But I'm not really going to do that. And yeah, that is basically how I utilize Photoshop. I also animate on different video layers for different colors, or you know, if you want things on top or on bottom. So, got some movement. That's what's up. That's what's up in Photoshop with the timeline and blank video layers. When you want to export, I always turn off the background so I can get the alpha channel. Go to File, Export, Render Video. All this stuff is going to pop up. You're going to want to save it where you want it. And I always use image sequence instead of QuickTime Export. QuickTime Export has dropped a couple frames on me, which is ridiculous, so I don't use it anymore. And I stick with image sequence. Have it on PNG, so you can get the alpha channel. Everything else should just reflect what's going on down here. And then just, you know, render it out. And then it'll render for you. Also, if you close this up, this will control which frames export. So I had it selecting the whole thing, but if I just wanted a segment, you can close it up in there, just like After Effects. So now, this is After Effects. Clicking on the project window, going to import file, and I'm going to find what I just made. Make sure PNG sequence is highlighted down here. I'm going to click Open. I'm going to right click, go to Interpret Footage, Main. I'm going to set the frame rate back at 12. If you want it to loop, this is where you loop it. I'm just going to drag that to a new project. New composition, I mean. And there you go. There's your thing that you make. You can just play with it and have some fun. And that is all of the knowledge I have